On today's Visual Studio Toolbox, Syed's going to show us Web Live Preview. This is a new design experience for ASP.NET Framework apps, and it's coming in Visual Studio 2022. Hi, welcome to Visual Studio Toolbox. I'm your host, Robert Green, and joining me today is Syed Hashimi. Hey, Syed.
Hello, Robert. How's it going, buddy?
Good. Welcome back to the show.
Yeah, thanks, man. Always
Always
happy to be
happy to have
here.
you.
Yeah, right.
And
Man, we've been going back long time back, man. Years.
I know. We're old friends.
Wow, man. We're growing old together, dude.
Yeah, I think I'm already old.
So
today we're going to talk about a new feature in Visual Studio 2022 called Web Live Preview.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely.
So tell us what that's about and what can we expect to see?
Sure. Yeah, exactly. So Web Live Preview, it's actually kind of a lot of things, but the main focus is that Web Live Preview is a kind of brand new designer for web forms. We've got some problems with the existing web forms designer. One main problem is, it's not accessible and the code is like 30 years old. So whenever we find bugs in the existing web forms designer, they're very difficult and very expensive to fix. So, we'd like to create a platform for the future here, so that way our web forms users always have a reliable designer to use there. So, we're creating a brand new designer here, and it supports all the latest and greatest kind of web technologies. HTML and CSS, all the latest versions of those and whatnot.
So you're basically saying that you're not abandoning web forms.
Absolutely not. No, our web forms users, they're very important users to us. A lot of them, they've been developing their web forms projects for, a decade or more. And, a lot of big companies are using web forms and they've made huge investments into these apps, right? So, it's not, we don't want to abandon or leave them behind, right? We need to kind of continue working with them and keeping them productive as they were before. So yeah, exactly.
Cool. Awesome.
Absolutely. Yep. And some people think that there's very little web forms usage, but there's still a lot of web forms development happening every single day in Visual Studio, and that's not going to be changing anytime soon.
Right. People aren't going to just rewrite their existing apps just because Microsoft invents cool new technology.
Absolutely.
We've learned that over the years. All right. So what does Web Live Preview look like?
All right, let's go ahead and jump into it here. So one thing that I want to kind of mention, at the front here is, we'll be talking a lot about web forms, but Web Live Preview actually works for any ASP.NET Framework project here, right? So that includes web forms and ASP.NET MVC and ASP.NET Razor pages. And that's where we are right now with Web Live Preview. But, some of this functionality will be coming to ASP.NET Core, hopefully in the future as well. So something I'll be working with the ASP.NET team and the Blazor team. So hopefully we can bring some of this designer experience to ASP.NET Core, but no promises there. Let's go ahead and jump into it. So I've got a web forms project here that I've loaded up, and I'm using an internal build, but everything that I'm going to show is available in the latest Visual Studio 2022 preview. So you can download this and do everything that I'm doing here as well. All right, so I've got this page opened up here. Let's go ahead and let me show you how to get into the designer here. So on the bottom left, I see, a design and split button. If I were to click on design, I'll go ahead and get the full page design view here. If I were to click on split, I'll get a kind of a split view here. And, the users might be familiar with this kind of layout. It's actually a little bit different here. So in the previous designer, inside the actual page, the designer was embedded within that page. But this new one, it's just your typical kind of tool window here. So, you can manage this window just like you manage all the other windows, right? You can maximize it onto a different screen, or, if you wanted to pin it to a certain region in Visual Studio, you can do that. So, if you don't like our defaults, you can always customize this to suit your particular needs there.
Cool.
And currently in this kind of current version, we've got some issues with the full page design view. So we'll be using the split view exclusively in this video here. All right, so this is Web Live Preview, and we can see that the app is actually running behind the scenes, and this is being rendered with a Edge WebView 2 control here. So that's actually what we see here. Let's go ahead and
Yeah.
kind of, let's go ahead and kind of move around a little bit, see what do we have here. So, as I select elements here, you might be noticing that the code is kind of synchronizing to that selection here, right? So if I were to select, students enrolled, we can see that, it goes to line 4 for students enrolled. If I were to click on some other stuff, let's say this paragraph here, it'll go to that paragraph. And then also we can go into, we can also go to things that are outside of this page here, right? So this Contoso University is coming from the site.master file. So we can see it went right into that site.master file there. So this is, selection synchronization, right? You select something and then it'll take you right to that code, right? And this is really great for teams that are working on apps and lots of different pages, and you notice some kind of problem, or you're working on a certain area and you're not exactly sure where in the code it is. You go ahead and go into design view, and then it'll take you right to the code, and then you can do your edits there, right?
Cool.
Let's go and take a look at some of the functionality that we've got here. So we can see I've got students enrolled here. I'm just going to modify this to be students by itself, get rid of the enrolled. We can see that the update was automatically pushed. I
Kind of
didn't
like
even.
the hot reload we XAML folks have been enjoying for
Yeah,
a while, yeah?
yeah, that's right. That's right. So this aspect of Web Live Preview is like hot reload, and the the goals for both Web Live Preview and hot reload are the same. We want to kind of
Yeah.
speed up what we call the inner loop, right? So the amount of time that you actually take developing your application locally, that's what we want to decrease by creating, whether it's hot reload or Web Live Preview. It's the same kind of productivity goals here. All right, so we just noticed that I made a change here to the text in the editor, and then that was pushed automatically as well. We can do that for other things as well here too, right? Like, if I were to go here and change my site.master name there, gets updated automatically. Didn't even need to save the file. Let's take a look at some other things that we can do. So now for static text elements, you can edit these directly in the designer as well. So let's say if I wanted to change this heading back to students enrolled, all I would do is go ahead and double click. Now that brings me into the edit mode. I'm going to type enrolled. And then
Nice.
you can either type enter or click somewhere that's outside of that control to then go ahead and commit that. So now we can see my changes have been committed back to my source.
And you don't need that page open to do that, right?
Web Live Preview will open the page one way or the other
So it
to
opens
actually
it,
make
okay.
that change. Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's
All
right.
right.
So
But you
that'll
don't have to
always
have
happen.
it open previously. It
Yep,
automatically knows where it is.
that's
Cool.
right. That's right. Yeah. So like, let's say if the site.master was closed, and if I were to click on this, it will open the site.master. Now we have a bug in this current version that it opens on the bottom.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
in the next release, it'll open up on the top here, so it doesn't cover your kind of design view here. But yeah, absolutely. You pick the element, it opens the code, but you could always just double click and make the change, and you don't even really care where the code is at, right? All right, so that's one thing that we've got there, and then let's take a look. For a web forms perspective, one of the kind of most common operations is to kind of drag and drop from the toolbox onto the design surface, right? So that's what we're going to do here. And we still got some bugs in this area. So, I wouldn't be surprised if we run into some problems here. But, we'll be working on making this more reliable and stable in the future as well. So what I'm going to do is I want to add a button here. Excuse me. I want to add a button here to add a new student. So I'm just going to take a button and then just kind of drag it over here and drop it. So now we've got our button here. Let me go back into the editor. One of the issues that we have today is we don't automatically assign the ID. So let me go ahead and do this. I'll do button add, and then we'll just change the text as well to add. All right, cool. So now, another very kind of common operation is to add the kind of default event handler for for controls, and the default event handler for a button is the on-click event. So that's what we want to go ahead and add a on-click event handler here for this button. So what I can do is just, simply double click this button here. So I'm going to do a double click. So yeah, if I were to go back to the ASPX file, I can see that it's added my on-click handler here. And if I go back to the code, I can see it's added my kind of stub method here. We'll do a response.redirect to a add student.aspx page. All right, we'll go ahead and save that. Now, one kind of thing here that says, hey, it needs update. So whenever you change like code and certain types of changes, you may need to perform an update. So I will go ahead and click on needs update here. So now this is going to go ahead and, kind of update the code. It'll basically do a build in the background and then update the view here. All right, so now we can see that, it's kind of finishing this update, and, we'll be working on the performance of this as well. And in the future, we're also going to introduce another kind of mode to where you don't actually need to build and run the app. It just kind of runs as it did before. But anyways, we got some issues here. It's not updating properly. But let me do the update there. Okay. All right. So I just clicked on refresh over here. So now one thing that I want to point out here is, I've got to I have a grid here. So this is actually live data coming from a database here. So if I were to take a look at my grid here, we can see that this is connected to a data source. Where is that? Oh, it's down here. Yeah, here it is. So this is coming, where is it? Oh, that's not the grid.
You just had it a second ago. There it is.
Yeah, it's here basically. Yeah, so we can see that this is all coming from a database from somewhere. Anyway, the text is way too big. I can't find anything here with this resolution. But what I wanted to point out was, we're seeing actual values coming out of my database, right? In the past, all this information, the ID and all these names and the dates would just say placeholder, literally the string placeholder, right? And you wouldn't know if you had 5 items in that database or 500,000, right? I mean, but with this view, we're actually running the code, and whatever your app shows is what you're going to see here. All right, so that was that. So now we mentioned that we're using the Edge View 2 control here. So one thing that we can do is actually interact with the application. So currently it's in like the design mode, and we used to call that inspect mode, but we'll probably change it to design mode, I guess. So now we have this kind of in-app menu here to go in and out of design mode. And in the future, this menu will go away, and there'll be a button up here to go in and out of the design mode. All right, so let me get out of the design mode, and now I'm just in like a browse mode here, kind of, right? So I can interact with this application. You can even edit this information here. Let's say if I wanted to fix a misspelling with this name, I can then go ahead and actually do an update, and that actually gets pushed to the database itself, right? So now let me see if that add student button is working. So when I click on this, it should take me to add students.aspx. All right, so now I've got my add student there, so we can see that worked.
Excellent.
Yeah, so we can see that worked. So that was the kind of default event handler there. Let's take a look at some other stuff here. So let me actually go back. One thing that I noticed here was, the ordering here for the year is not actually correct here. I've got sophomore, freshman, junior, senior. So sophomore should be below freshman in this particular list. Okay, so let's go and see if we can fix that. All right, so now I'm back into the design mode here, and one feature that I want to point out, and let me show it in the kind of code editor here, so that way users can understand what's actually happening here. So certain controls, certain web form controls have what's called a smart tag, or an sorry about that. It's actually called an action panel. So the formal name is action panel, but sometimes it's referred to as smart tag or smart task. However, it's referred to. So, so here we can see that this is kind of the action panel. So what I want to do is I want to go using the designer. I want to go into the action panel. So you see, we've got these double arrows here.
Yep.
That's the indication that an action panel is available for this particular control. We can compare that to the add button that doesn't have those double arrows because buttons don't have any action panel support. So let me go into the action panel. I'm going to go ahead and select edit items here from sophomore. Cool. Yeah, I'm just going to move it down. And, this is exactly the same kind of workflow that users would typically have in the existing web forms designer as well.
Right.
So I move sophomore down, and we can see in the code it will get updated as well. So let me go ahead and click update, or OK there, I mean, and then we can see that it put sophomore in the correct location there. And then if I were to get out of the, if I were to get out, go back into that browse mode, we could see that that got fixed. But, we can see it in the code here as well. And we got other stuff to kind of demo here. So I want to move on to the other demos as opposed to just showing that. All right, one of my kind of favorite features of WebLive Preview is actually the CSS Auto Sync. And I'm not sure about everybody that's watching, but personally, I'm not like a CSS expert. So normally, when I'm creating my websites, I'll create the HTML, and then I'll start working on the CSS. And usually I'll use the browser developer tools for that. But the problem is, I always have to remember, what were the CSS changes that I made in the browser dev tools. And then I will go back and, try and remember all that stuff and add it to my actual file itself, right? So now let me show you what we have with WebLive Preview. And let me go ahead and point out, this is not a web forms project. This is an ASP.NET MVC project. But these same features work in web forms, MVC, and Razor pages for those ASP.NET web forms projects. All right, now let me show you one of my kind of favorite features here, Robert. So the feature that I'm about to show is the CSS Auto Sync, and I've opened up a different solution here. This is actually an ASP.NET MVC project, and like I mentioned before, everything WebLive Preview supports all the ASP.NET framework projects. So that's web forms, MVC, and Razor pages. So the CSS Auto Sync also works across those three. So yeah, let's go ahead and go into it. So I've got a gridcard.cshtml file here. Let me go ahead and go into the go ahead and open up the designer here. And then I'll open up my gridcard.css here. And here, what we want to do is go ahead and start kind of designing this, and make it look like a grid, like how we want. So first, I'm just going to go ahead and align the heading here, so we can see, as I'm typing, the moment that the CSS file is syntactically doesn't have any syntactic errors, we'll go ahead and push those changes to the design view here. So you can see I typed text align center, and it got centered and didn't even have to change the file or anything like that. Now let's go ahead and start working on our grid. So first I'll say, hey, I want this to be displayed as a grid. I want the height to be 100% for that grid. And then let's go set some properties on the div themselves. So I'll say the height should be 25 VH here. Save that file. We can see now that they've kind of spread around here. So now we need to go ahead and add our kind of grid columns here. So I'll say grid template columns. I want 4 columns here. We use the fractional measurement here that CSS offers us. Cool. So once that once that statement got complete, boom, it kind of went into the right way here. But you could always play around with different columns.
That's so awesome, because you don't have to make a change to that, rerun the app, and then go back and forth. Do I want 3? Do I want 4? Do I want 5? This is so awesome.
It's pretty, man, this is a real productivity. This is just huge from a productivity perspective, I think, So now let's go ahead and set some properties here. So I'll say background color for the divs. Just set it to gray, I guess. Doesn't really matter too much. Okay, so now I'm noticing that, everything's kind of squished together here. So I want to introduce some sort of a gap here. So I'll say grid gap is 1 EM. So now we got a little bit of a gap there. Let's take a look at what else. Now I want to kind of, more kind of center the font and make it a little bit larger there. So let's set the font size 10V min. And then let's go ahead and set some additional properties here. So, oops, not that one. So set the line height to 25 VH as well. We'll do a text align center here.
Yeah.
And then let's see
Awesome.
what else. That's yeah, that's pretty much about it. But you saw how easily I was able to take, because all my definition here is really just a section with a bunch of divs here, right? So
Yep.
I took that and then I was easily able to kind of create a grid here, and I didn't have to worry about the browser developer tools, and having to remember that, oh, I added text align center for the H1, and I added these properties for the grid card section, and then these for the div here, right? Often when I use those browser developer tools, it's I kind of forget, maybe I forget one or two things here and there, and it just takes a
Right.
little bit of additional
It's also a
time.
context switch. Here you're just inside Visual
Yeah.
Studio.
Yeah, that's right. And and I can always undo and redo things, and save my files and then commit them as I need to, and it's just a huge productivity gain here. So
Well,
yeah,
that
I think,
is awesome.
yeah. And there's one other kind of real quick demo that I want to show for you here today, Robert, if you don't mind. So here we've got a button here, open in browser. So let's go ahead and open that up. It just popped up on a different screen. So let me bring that here. I will copy the URL. I'm just going to make this a lot smaller here. And I will bring another one. I'm just going to bring it next to it and then paste that as well. And now let me bring my Visual Studio over here. So now what I want to show you is, as we're making changes to the app, whether it's in the CSS or the code itself, whether you have one client or several, they will all automatically get those changes, right? And I think it's hard to see on this one screen, especially I've got a very low resolution for this video, but if you're working on a website, odds are you're looking to support different devices, right? You're probably going to, support phones and tablets and desktop. So with this, and basically, you can take one of the windows and set it up as if it was a phone, so I can, oh, well, this is about as narrow as it gets with this particular resolution, but, imagine that was a phone, and then I can set this one up as a tablet, and one can be in portrait, one can be in landscape. You modify your CSS, and then boom, you see how it looks like, for the desktop view, for the mobile view, for the tablet view. It's not like you're always having to switch back and forth between these different things. And, that's always something that's problematic for me. I'll make a change to improve the desktop view, but then, there's a minor regression in the mobile or the tablet view. So with this approach, you can see all those views and they get updated, automatically at the same time.
Cool. So if
that's
people want to play around with this, they just download the latest Visual Studio 2022 preview.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
then
So
if they want to share comments or have feature requests, what can they do?
yeah, exactly. So, the best way to do it is to use the help send feedback. So you have two choices here: report a problem, and that's for, let's say, unexpected behavior or bugs, right? So if you run into something that you feel is a bug, and it's not doing the right thing, that's where report a problem comes in. And then you can also suggest a feature. So if you say, hey, here's a great idea for a new feature, you can use suggest a feature for that. So I think those are the main kind of avenues. Those are the main avenues for providing feedback, not only to WebLive Preview, but, Visual Studio all up. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on and showing us this stuff. That is very, very cool.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Robert.
And I hope you guys enjoyed that. And we will see you next time on Visual Studio Toolbox.